Okay, we're gonna find missing sides of right triangles by using trigonometric ratios. In order to do this, we need to understand these three terms for the sides of a right triangle. Normally we call them hypotenuse and legs, but we're gonna introduce the idea of opposite and adjacent side. So how do we identify who's the opposite and who's the adjacent? Everything has to do with the angle that is provided. If the angle is in here, okay, then you're going to know that the opposite will be pointed by that particular angle. The angle that is provided is always going to point to the opposite side. So that angle is pointing in here. This would be the opposite side. The hypotenuse is always pointed by the right angle. The right angle being this little square that you see in here. That square is pointing always at the hypotenuse. And the one that is not being pointed at would be the adjacent side. So if we have, for example, the angle not in here, but we have the angle in here, then this angle is pointing at this side. This one would be then the opposite side, and in this case this one will be the adjacent side. It all depends on where the angle is pointing at. The first thing you need to find always is the opposite side. You need to use that in order to orientate yourself and know which are each one of the sides. So the angle that is provided is always going to point at the opposite side. That's something you need to know. Next, we are gonna use one of the three main trigonometric ratios. There are 6 trigonometric ratios. We're just gonna use 3 of them: sine, cosine, and tangent. Each one of them has a particular formula that involves dividing these sides that are provided in here. So sine of the angle will be equal to the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine of the angle equals the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. Tangent of the angle equals the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So this one and this one would be sine. This one and this one would be cosine. And this one and this one would be tangent. You need to memorize these formulas, even though you're not going to use, you're not going to write them. Yes, you're going to use them, but you're not going to put the words opposite and hypotenuse. No, you're going to put whatever is given in the exercise. So let's try to use these things. Remember, memorize these formulas, because those you need to know in order to solve exercises. Let's see this. Find the value of each variable. So we have letter Z and we have 12. Now, what are these things? Well, you can see I have an angle of 30 degrees. Where is that angle pointing at? It's pointing at Z. So Z would be the opposite side. The square is pointing at 12. So 12 will be the hypotenuse. So what do I have? I have opposite and I have hypotenuse. Which formula is opposite and hypotenuse? That formula is sine. That's why you need to memorize the formulas so that you know which one are you going to use. It's not cosine, because cosine requires adjacent. I don't have adjacent in the exercise. It's not tangent, because I also need adjacent and I don't have adjacent in the exercise. So it's sine. How do I know? Because I memorized the formulas. So sine of the angle. I'm not going to write this symbol. That means the angle. I already know the angle is 30, so I'm going to put 30. Sine of 30 degrees, okay? Equals, what is sine? Opposite divided by hypotenuse. Who's the opposite? Z. So I'm going to put Z divided by the hypotenuse. Who is the hypotenuse? 12. What am I going to do next? Well, simple. This 12, you're going to pass it to multiply. Where? Always write, if you're going to multiply with a trigonometric ratio, always write the number first and then the trigonometric ratio. So the 12 will be in here, but not in this step. You need to make another step where you make the movement. So 12 is going to pass to multiply to this side. 12 sine 30 degrees equals Z. So passing the denominator to multiply is always going to be the first step that you do, okay? You're always going to pass to multiply the denominator. And then it depends on the exercise. So in this exercise, I already left the variable alone. That is your goal, to leave the variable alone. Once the variable is alone, you just need to write this in your calculator. So if I write 12 sine of 30 degrees in the calculator, the answer will give me 6. So I'm going to write the letter of the exercise, z, equals the answer for what I got in the calculator, 6. And there you go. Pretty simple. Let's see more examples on how to use these things. Okay, next. I'm looking for the variable x. Now, where is the angle pointing at? 50 degrees is pointing at this angle, so this would be opposite. This one is pointing, the square is pointing in here, so this one will be the hypotenuse. That means the x is adjacent. So what do I have? I have adjacent and I have hypotenuse. Which of the three formulas is adjacent or hypotenuse? Since I memorized the formulas, I know that it is cosine. I don't need to look for it because I already know. This is a formula. These three formulas, you need to memorize them. So cosine of the angle is 50 degrees. So cosine of 50 degrees equals adjacent divided by hypotenuse. So adjacent will be first, the x, divided by hypotenuse. Hypotenuse, which is 75, is going to be down. Then the first step is to pass the 75 to multiply. I'm going to do that in another step. 75 cosine of 50 degrees equals x. Okay? Now the letter is alone. That means I just need to put this in the calculator and I will get the answer. So if you put 75 cosine of 50 degrees, you're going to get an ugly decimal. There is no way to get a fraction answer because most of times when you use trigonometric ratios, you get irrational answers. So what are you going to do in this case? Well, in this case, you're going to round. You're going to round to how many decimal positions? 4 decimal positions. So if you round, you're going to get that x is approximately equal to 48.20 and then 90, but then there's another number that is higher than 5, so that 90 is going to increase to 91. Okay, 48.2091 or 2091. That will be the answer for this exercise. And there you go. Next, let's change things a little bit. Let's see. Now the angle is on the right side. Well, where is the angle pointing at? This angle is pointing at 10. So 10 is the opposite side. The square is pointing at A. So A is the hypotenuse. I have opposite and hypotenuse. Which formula is that? Since I memorized the formulas, I know that opposite over hypotenuse would be sine. So sine of the angle is 60. So sine of 60 degrees equals the opposite side. Okay, that one goes first. So it will be 10 divided by the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse in this case is A. Notice that the letter in here is down this time. I never said that the letter was going to be up. Nope. What am I going to put up? It depends on the formula. The formula in here is saying that opposite goes up. So you put opposite up. But the letter will be down. I don't care. The formula says you put opposite up, right? So 10 over 8. Then the step that you're always going to do. This denominator, you're going to pass it to multiply here. So let's do that in another step. It will be A sine of 60 degrees equals 10. So we have a situation in here. The variable is not alone because we have a sine of 60. So what do you do if the variable is not alone? Well, you're going to pass that sine of 60 to divide. Okay? So let's do that. A equals 10, and this sine of 60 is going to divide. Now I have the letter or the variable alone. If you have the variable alone, you just need to write this in your calculator. So you're going to write 10 divided by sine of 60. So 10 divided by sine of 60 will give you an ugly number. Okay? You're going to get a lot of decimal numbers in there. Right? So we're going to round. So you don't have an equal, you have an approximation, right? You're going to round to 4 decimal positions. if you round to 4 decimal positions, you will get 11.547. That will be the value of letter or variable A. There we go. Next. Now look at the angle. Now the angle is not at the base, the angle is on top. Okay. Where is the angle pointing at? Well, this angle is pointing at this side. So 13 would be the opposite side. Now look at this square. The square is pointing at this diagonal, so this will be the hypotenuse. I don't have the hypotenuse in here. What would the x be then? If I already have 13 being the opposite side and this diagonal being the hypotenuse, then x has to be the adjacent side. So what do I have in here? I have adjacent and I have opposite. Okay, this one was opposite because the angle is pointing in here. Always remember that the opposite side is where the angle is pointing at, and this one that it will be the adjacent side. So which formula uses adjacent and opposite? Tangent. Okay, tangent equals opposite side divided by adjacent. How do I know that? Because I memorized the formula. So tangent of the angle is 40. So tangent of 40 degrees equals opposite divided by adjacent. Who is the opposite in here? 13. So 13 divided by the adjacent, which is x. Then what is the first step that we do after this? Well, this one we pass it to multiplying here, right? So let's do that in another step. X tangent of 40 degrees equals 13. Now, the variable x is not alone. There's a tangent in there right next to it. So that tangent, I'm going to pass it to divide the 13. So let's do that. X equals 13. And the tangent is going to be under 13. So divided by tangent of 40 degrees. Now, the variable is alone. I just need to write this in the calculator and that will give me the answer. Again, I'm going to get a very long decimal number. I am going to round to 4 decimal positions. So this would be an approximation. X is approximately 15.4928. And there you go. Let's do one more exercise. Again, the angle is on top. Okay, where is the angle pointing at? It's pointing at this side. So this will be the opposite. The square is pointing at, or the 90 degrees angle is pointing at y. So y would be the hypotenuse. So I have the opposite side in here, the hypotenuse in here. That means 7 would be the adjacent side. So what do I have? I have the adjacent and I have the hypotenuse. Which formula uses adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine. So cosine of the angle, I know the angle is 35, so I put 35. Cosine of 35 equals adjacent over hypotenuse. What do I do next? This one I pass it to multiply to this side. So let's do that. Y cosine of 35 degrees equals 7. The letter is not alone. So what am I going to do? This cosine, I'm going to pass it to divide. Let's do that. Y equals 7 divided by cosine of 35 degrees. And 7 divided by cosine of 35 degrees would give you approximately in your calculator 8.5454. And that is how we find missing sides in right triangles by using trigonometric ratios.